Talk at WG. Brief introduction. Back in the day, remember Anthony had different people, volunteers, get up in front of the class and give a quote from the vast volume of PB quotes which we inherited, and then a brief talk of their understanding of it. At that time I had nothing to say. I hadn't read enough of the quotes, so this is an attempt to fulfill that challenge. PB quote. I am an Advaitin on the fundamental point of non-duality of the real, but I am unable to limit myself to most Advaitins' practical view of Samadhi and Sahaja. Here I stand with Chinese Zen, Chan, especially as I was taught and as explained by the sixth patriarch, Huining. He warns against turning meditation into a narcotic, resulting in a pleasant passivity. He went so far as to declare, "It is quite unnecessary to stay in monasteries. Let your mind function in freedom, let it abide nowhere." And in this connection he later explains, to be free from attachment to all outer objects is true meditation. To meditate means to realize thus the tranquility of essence of mind. On Samadhi, he defines it as a mind self-trained to be unattached amid objects, resting in tranquility and peace. On Sahaja, it is thorough understanding of the truth about reality and a penetration into and through delusion to one's essence of mind. The Indian notion of Sahaja makes it the extension of Nirvikalpa Samadhi into the active everyday state. But the Chan conception of Nirvikalpa differs from this. It does not seek deliberately to eliminate thoughts. That may often happen of its own accord through identification with the true mind, but to eliminate the personal feelings usually attached to them. That is, to remain unaffected by them because of this identification. Chan does not consider Sahaja to be the fruit of yoga meditation alone, nor of understanding alone, but of a combination seemingly of both. It is a union of reason and intuition. It is an awakening once and for all. It is not attained in Nirvikalpa and then to be held as long as possible. It is not something, a state alternately gained and lost on numerous occasions. Remind you of anyone? The realizations of Plotinus, but gradually expanded as it is clung to. It is a single awakening that enlightens the man so that he never returns to ignorance again. He is awakened to his divine essence, his source in mind, as an all-day and everyday self-identification. It has come by itself, effortlessly. Notebooks Category 25, World Mind and Individual Mind, Chapter 2, Enlightenment Which Stays. Appreciation for PB's clarity and precision. This is a pretty complete statement. The question is, where do you go to find more information on this? Well, there's not a lot out there. You rarely come across anything similar. But I found a group on Facebook, of all places, called Awakening to Reality, and it's a group of mainly Southeast Asian Buddhists in Singapore and Indonesia who have developed a lineage. I started studying this. I'd like to say I appreciate Paul Brunton's maintaining the integrity of the individual right up until the end, right up until liberation, and in some sense after that. So that even though subjectively you may be free, objectively you may be the witnessing of life, still functioning as an individual. It is interesting to note that although spiritual attainment is a dissolving of the individual into the one, the more advanced a person gets on the path, the more they stand out as an individual. This may be an example of the Buddhist tenet of the union of emptiness and dependent arising. When you see the idea of no self or no mind, which is a key idea and a tenet of Buddhism, you can substitute over self for that. To realize the Overself is an insight and a revelation of the nature of consciousness, but appears to be empty because it is formless and the mind can only deal with formed objects. So it makes it easier to accept the no-self teaching. In Western philosophy, there exist two schools, the realists and the idealists. Idealists represented by Bishop Berkeley. He was librarian at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. And we also have David Hume on the realist side, and he's a librarian at Edinburgh University and around the same time. What I propose is that Buddhism represents a realistic approach and Hinduism is subjective idealist side, theistic and atheistic. Of course, the Western philosophers don't have liberation, enlightenment, and anything like that which the Eastern schools do. And the other thing is that Buddhism, you could say it's a religion, but it's really more like a mind training course to get rid of your addiction to thought. It's a rehab facility. There's an interesting book that I came across called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel M. Ingram. So Ingram claims have gone through the entire course of Hinayana mind training and to have reached arhathood. And it's an interesting book. It's also an audiobook and it's free. Also, PB mentions Huineng. Huineng's enlightenment, I think, changed Buddhism. Before that, you had to meditate your brains out. Look at the Buddhist caves like the caves, also known as Caves of the Thousand Buddhas, form a system of 500 temples 25 kilometers southeast of the center of Dunhuang, an oasis located at a religious and cultural crossroads on the Silk Road. In Gansu Province, China. China was the first country to be Buddhist because of the Silk Road. What Huineng brought was spontaneous enlightenment. Satori, the flash of insight, the short path. It changed Buddhism. It became popular. Lovely art at Tungwang. Early Buddhism, you could have no images of the Buddha and there were no supernatural entities except a forest nymph. These cave Buddhists were obviously Mahayana. The first caves were dug out in 366 CE as places of Buddhist meditation and worship. Later the caves became a place of pilgrimage, and caves continued to be built at the site until the 14th century. The third patriarch of Buddhism was the author of the Hsn Ming, a famous poem text. Interesting article on Harvard and the Buddhist caves. The Great Way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. He had only 2 students. Huineng was the 6th patriarch. He changed the course of Buddhism. As a kid, he was walking through the market when he heard a monk reciting the Diamond Sutra, and he was immediately awakened. Later, he was a dishwasher at a big monastery. The abbot was preparing to pass on the mantle and had the monks submit poems to prove their merit and understanding. Huineng is regarded as the founder of the Sudden Enlightenment, Southern Chan school of Buddhism, which focuses on an immediate and direct attainment of Buddhist enlightenment. Best student poem. The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a bright mirror stand. At all times we must strive to polish it, and must not let dust collect. Huineng. Dunhuang text. Bodhi originally has no tree. The bright mirror also has no stand. Fundamentally, there is not a single thing. Where could dust arise? The Awakening to Reality group, which I found on Facebook, initiates, documents, developed a revival of Chinese Buddhism and updating the relevance to modern life. Two key figures in the Awakening to Reality group are Mr. John Tan, also known as Thusness/Passerby, and So Wei Yu. This is from Mr. Tan, who is the guru, the teacher, the guy who originated this new period of insight into Buddhism. He says, I got in touch with Buddhism in 1997 not because I wanted to find out more about the experience of presence, but rather the teaching of impermanence synced deeply with what I was experiencing in life. I was faced with the possibility of losing all my wealth and more, a financial crisis. At that point in time, I had no idea Buddhism was so profoundly rich on the aspect of presence. The mystery of life cannot be understood. I sought for refuge in Buddhism to alleviate my sorrows caused by the financial crisis, but it turned out to be the missing key towards experiencing total presence. I wasn't that resistant then to the doctrine of no self. But the idea that all phenomenal existence was empty of inherent self or self, capital S, did not quite get into me. Were they talking about self as a personality or self as an eternal witness? Must we do away even with the witness? Was the witness itself another illusion? And then he says, there is thinking, no thinker. There is sound, no hearer. Suffering exists, no sufferer. Deeds there are, no doer. Lines of the Buddha from the Bahia Sutra, which is possibly the shortest sutra ever. I was meditating on the meaning of the above stanza deeply until one day I suddenly heard tongs. Tongs being the sound of tongs. You know, like cooking utensil. It was so clear there was nothing else, just sound and nothing else, and tongs resounding. The experience was so familiar, so real, and so clear. It was the same experience of I am. It was without thought, without concepts, without intermediary, without anyone there, without any in between. What was it? It was presence, but this time it was not the I am. It was not asking, who am I? It was not the pure sense of I am. It was tongs, pure sound. And then came taste. Just the taste, nothing else. The heartbeats, the scenery. There was no gap in between, no longer a few months gap for it to arise. There was never a stage to enter, nor to cease, and never have existed. There was no entry and exit point. There was no sound out there or in here. There was no I apart from the arising and ceasing. Moment to moment, presence unfolds. This is a commentary by So Wei Yu. The beginning of non-dual realization and the gateless gate without entry and exit. One no longer seeks after a state of oblivion to get rid of self as in the case with stage 3. But starts to realize and actualize the always already so of no self and non-dual nature of awareness. Still, stage 4 tends to end up in the case of dissolving separateness into the pole of an ultimate pure subjectivity rather than seeing consciousness as the mere flow of phenomenality as in stage 5. Thusness wrote in 2005, without self, oneness is immediately attained. There is only and always isness, subject always been the object of observation. This is the true samadhi without entering trance. Complete understanding of this truth. It is the true way towards liberation. Every sound, sensation, arising of consciousness is so clear and real and vivid. Every moment is samadhi. The tip of the fingers in contact with the keyboard mysteriously created the contact consciousness. What is it? Feel the entirety of beingness and realness. There is no subject, just isness, no thought. There really is no thought and no self, only pure awareness. How could anyone understand the crying of the sound, the noise of the Buddha? The crying, the sound, the noises are all Buddha. It is all the experience of thusness. To know the true meaning of this, hold not even the slightest trace of I. In the inmost nature of the state of isness, all is. Even if one said the same statement, the depth of experience differs. There is no point convincing anyone. Can anyone understand any form of rejection? Any form of division is to reject Buddhahood. If there is the slightest sense of the subject, if there is the slightest sense of an experiencer, we miss the point. Natural awareness is subjectless. Vividness and clarity, feel, taste, see and hear with totality. There is always no, I thank you, Buddha. You truly know. My remark, I am not an expert at this subject, not a professor, not an elucidator, but maybe a suggestive inquirer. Medieval Chinese Buddhists brought up this idea that enlightenment, self-realization, was the goal of the path, and once successfully attained, another path begins. The Bodhisattva path, called the 10 Bhumis, SP Bhumis. I jumped to the conclusion that they, awakening to reality group, were bringing out the 10 Bhumis, but that's really not so. The 7 stages presented here are an original interpretation of the Bahia Sutra by thusness/passerby. In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. In the sensed, there is only the sensed. In the cognized, there is only the cognized. Thus you should see that indeed there is no thing here. This, Bahia, is how you should train yourself. Since, Bahia, there is for you. In the seen, only the seen. In the heard, only the heard. In the sensed, only the sensed. In the cognized, only the cognized. And you see that there is no thing here. You will therefore see that indeed there is no thing there. As you see that there is no thing there, you will see that you are therefore located neither in the world of this, nor in the world of that, nor in any place betwixt the two. This alone is the end of suffering. Thusness/passerby's 7 stages of enlightenment. Stage 1. The experience of I am. Stage 2. The experience of I am everything. Stage 3. Entering into a state of nothingness. Stage 4. Presence as mirror bright clarity. Stage 5. No mirror reflecting. Stage 6. The nature of presence is empty. Stage 7. Presence is spontaneously perfected. So, this article was written by my teacher, thusness/passerby. I have personally experienced these phases of realizations. Stage 1. The experience of I am. Thusness speaking, it was about 20 years back, and it all started with the question of before birth, who am I? I do not know why, but this question seemed to capture my entire being. I could spend days and nights just sitting focusing, pondering over this question, till one day, everything seemed to come to a complete standstill. Not even a single thread of thought arose. There was merely nothing and completely void, only this pure sense of existence. This mere sense of I, this presence, what was it? It was not the body, not thought as there was no thought, nothing at all, just existence itself. There was no need for anyone to authenticate this understanding. At that moment of realization, I experienced a tremendous flow of energy being released. It was as if life was expressing itself through my body, and I was nothing but this expression. However, at that point in time, I was still unable to fully understand what this experience was and how I had misunderstood its nature. As Tony once said, the I am thought is the only real idea you are ever going to come across. I have to distinguish an out-of-body experience from realizing the I am. In an out-of-body experience, you realize that you, the everyday sense of you, survives the life of the body. A key experience on any spiritual path, but is not the realization of the I. The true I is knowing being, the nous in Plotinus. Non-dual. Imagine consciousness as a clear crystal ball. At the far end is you walking around, talking to people, socializing, and at the top end is you absorbed in contemplating knowing being, the I am, in a primordial time and space, a sphere of consciousness, unattached to that seeming person walking around down there. Comments by So. This is also the first stage of the 5 ranks of Tozen Ryokai, a Zen Buddhism map of awakening, called the apparent within the real. This phase can also be described as an oceanic ground of being or source devoid of the sense of individuality/personal self, described here by Thusness in 2006. Like a river flowing into the ocean, the self dissolves into nothingness. When a practitioner becomes thoroughly clear about the illusionary nature of the individuality, subject-object division does not take place. A person experiencing I-amness will find I-amness in everything. What is it like? Adyashanti's second realization. Being freed from individuality, coming and going, life and death, all phenomenon merely pop in and out from the background of the I-amness. The I-amness is not experienced as an entity residing anywhere, neither within nor without. Rather, it is experienced as the ground reality for all phenomenon to take place. Even in the moment of subsiding, death, the yogi is thoroughly authenticated with that reality, experiencing the real, as clear as it can be. We cannot lose that I-amness. Rather, all things can only dissolve and re-emerge from it. The I-amness has not moved. There is no coming and going. This I-amness is God. Practitioners should never mistake this as the true Buddha mind. I-amness is the pristine awareness. That is why it is so overwhelming. Just that there is no insight into its emptiness nature. Excerpt from Buddha Nature is not I am. Stage 2. The experience of I am everything. My remarks. If you have ever been in love, you can get a taste of this. The whole world of your perception is tainted by this love. Rosy-colored sunglasses. Drop the body and drop the personal reflective mind, and the ground of universe is experienced as love. It sees you, the world, in a luminous sphere of intimacy and love, while you in a parallel reality go about your business simultaneously. And the world mind in its efficiency uses the existing structures to create the world, namely you. It projects the world image through you as a possibility. Go to sleep at night and the projection is turned off. Die and the projection is turned off. In the world of computers, there are 2 types of graphics, pixel-based and vector. Pixel-based is dot for dot correspondence, kind of like a Seurat painting. The other type is vector-based, mathematical formulas. What do mathematical structures look like? They look like nothing. Like a diamond in a glass of water. It's invisible, but the structures it represents is there. Thusness continued. It seemed that my experience was supported by many Advaita and Hindu teachings. But the biggest mistake I made was when I spoke to a Buddhist friend. He told me about the doctrine of no self, about no I. I rejected such doctrine outright as it was in direct contradiction with what I had experienced. I was deeply confused for some time and could not appreciate why Buddha had taught this doctrine and, worse still, make it a Dharma seal. Until one day, I experienced the fusing of everything into me, but somehow there was no me. It was like an eyeless I. I somehow accepted the no I idea, but then I still insisted that Buddha shouldn't have put it that way. The experience was wonderful. It was as if I was totally emancipated, a complete release without boundary. I told myself I am totally convinced that I am no longer confused, so I wrote a poem, something like the below. I am the rain. I am the sky. I am the blueness, the color of the sky. Nothing is more real than the I. Therefore, Buddha, I am I. There's a phrase for this experience. Whenever and wherever there is, the is me. This phrase was like a mantra to me. I often use this to lead me back into the experience of presence. The rest of the journey was the unfolding and further refining of this experience of total presence. But somehow there was always this blockage, this something preventing me from recapturing the experience. It was the inability to fully die into total presence. Comments by So. The following excerpt should clarify about this phase. It is bringing this I am into everything. I am the I in you. The I in the cat, the I in the bird. I am the first person in everyone and everything. That is my second phase. That the I is ultimate and universal. John Tan, 2013. Stage 3. Entering into a state of nothingness. Somehow something was blocking the natural flow of my innermost essence and preventing me from reliving the experience. Presence was still there, but there was no sense of totality. It was both logically and intuitively clear that I was the problem. It was the I that was blocking. It was the I that was the limit. It was the I that was the boundary, but why couldn't I do away with it? At that point in time, it didn't occur to me that I should look into the nature of awareness and what awareness is all about. Instead, I was too occupied with the art of entering into a state of oblivion to get rid of the I. This continued for the next 13 plus years. In between, of course, there were many other minor events, and the experience of total presence did occur many times, but with gaps a few months long. However, I came to one important understanding. The I is the root cause of all artificialities. True freedom is in spontaneity. Surrender into complete nothingness, and everything is simply self-so. Mark, I also had this problem, but it was when I was a teenager. I had a big glimpse and then could not bear myself as I appeared to myself, and so turned to alcohol to get rid of the personal sense of I. Comments by So. However, it is only at thusness stage 4 and 5 that one realizes that the effortless and natural way to give up self is through the realization and actualization of anatta as an insight, not through entering a special or altered state of trance, samadhi, absorption, or oblivion. As thusness wrote before. It seems that lots of effort needs to be put in, which is really not the case. The entire practice turns out to be an undoing process. It is a process of gradually understanding the workings of our nature that is from beginning liberated, but clouded by this sense of self, that is always trying to preserve, protect, and ever attached. The entire sense of self is a doing. Whatever we do, positive or negative, is still doing. A turning point for the short path. Ultimately, there is not even a letting go or let be, as there is already continuous dissolving and arising, and this ever-dissolving and arising turns out to be self-liberating. Without this self or self, there is no doing, there is only spontaneous arising. Thusness, source, non-dual and karmic patterns. When one is unable to see the truth of our nature, all letting go is nothing more than another form of holding in disguise. Therefore, without the insight, there is no releasing. It is a gradual process of deeper seeing. When it is seen, the letting go is natural. You cannot force yourself into giving up the self. Purification to me is always these insights, non-dual and emptiness nature. My comment: Anthony once said you cannot give up the I, life has to do it. Meaning circumstances or other people, sages or random people have to do it. In the West there is the story of insight of Archimedes. The most widely known anecdote about Archimedes tells of how he invented a method for determining the volume of an object with an irregular shape. According to Vitruvius, a crown for a temple had been made for King Hiero II of Syracuse, who supplied the pure gold to be used. The crown was likely made in the shape of a votive wreath. Archimedes was asked to determine whether some silver had been substituted by the goldsmith without damaging the crown, so he could not melt it down into a regularly shaped body in order to calculate its density. In this account, Archimedes noticed while taking a bath that the level of the water in the tub rose as he got in, and realized that this effect could be used to determine the golden crown's volume. Archimedes was so excited by this discovery that he took to the streets naked, having forgotten to dress, crying, "Eureka! I have found it!" For practical purposes, water is incompressible, so the submerged crown would displace an amount of water equal to its own volume. By dividing the mass of the crown by the volume of water displaced, its density could be obtained. If cheaper and less dense metals had been added, the density would be lower than that of gold. Archimedes found that this is what had happened, proving that silver had been mixed in. Stage 4. Presence as mirror bright clarity. Repeat. Thusness. I got in touch with Buddhism in 1997. Not because I wanted to find out more about the experience of presence, but rather the teaching of impermanence synced deeply with what I was experiencing in life. I was faced with the possibility of losing all my wealth and more by financial crisis. At that point in time, I had no idea that Buddhism is so profoundly rich on the aspect of presence. The mystery of life cannot be understood. I sought for a refuge in Buddhism to alleviate my sorrows caused by the financial crisis, but it turned out to be the missing key towards experiencing total presence. I wasn't that resistant then to the doctrine of no self, but the idea that all phenomenal existence is empty of an inherent self, or self, did not quite get into me. Were they talking about the self as a personality or self as eternal witness? Must we do away even with the witness? Was the witness itself another illusion? There is thinking, no thinker. There is sound, no hearer. Suffering exists, no sufferer. Deeds there are, no doer. I was meditating on the meaning of the above stanza deeply until one day, suddenly I heard tonks. It was so clear. There was nothing else, just the sound and nothing else. And tongs resounding. It was so clear, so vivid. It was the same experience of I am. It was without thought, without concepts, without intermediary, without anyone there, without any in-between. What was it? It was presence. But this time it was not I am. It was not asking, who am I? It was not the pure sense of I am. It was tongs, the pure sound. Then came taste, just the taste and nothing else. The heartbeats, the scenery. There was no gap in between, no longer a few months gap for it to arise. There never was a stage to enter, no, I to cease, and never had it existed. There is no entry and exit point. There is no sound out there or in here. There is no I, apart from the arising and ceasing. The manifold of presence. Moment-to-moment presence unfolds. So comments. This is the beginning of seeing through no self. Insight into no self has arisen, but non-dual experience is still very much Brahman rather than Sunyata. In fact, it is more Brahman than ever. Now, I amness is experienced in all. Nevertheless, it is a very important key phase where the practitioner experiences a quantum leap in perception, untying the dualistic knot. This is also the key insight leading to the realization that all is mind, all is just this one reality. The tendency to extrapolate an ultimate reality or universal consciousness, where we are part of this reality, remains surprisingly strong. Effectively, the dualistic knot is gone, but the bond of seeing things inherently isn't. Dualistic and inherent knots that prevent the full experiencing of our Maha, the empty and non-dual nature of pristine awareness, are two very different perceptual spells that blind. Thusness wrote in 2005, "Without self, oneness is immediately attained. There is only and always this isness. Subject has always been the object of observation. This is true samadhi without entering trance. Completely understanding this truth. It is the true way towards liberation. Every sound, sensation, arising of consciousness is so clear, real, and vivid. Every moment is samadhi. The tip of the fingers in contact with the keyboard mysteriously created the contact consciousness. What is it? Feel the entirety of beingness and realness. There is no subject, just isness. No thought, there really is no thought, and no self. Only pure awareness. How could anyone understand? The crying, the sound, the noise is Buddha. It is all the experience of thusness. To know the true meaning of this, hold not even the slightest trace of I. In the most natural state of I-lessness, all is. Even if one said the same statement, the depth of experience differs. There is no point convincing anyone. Can anyone understand? Any form of rejection, any sort of division is to reject Buddhahood. If there is a slightest sense of a subject, an experiencer, we miss the point. Natural awareness is subjectless. The vividness and clarity. Feel, taste, see, and hear with totality. There is always no I. Thank you, Buddha, you truly know. Smiley face. Stage 5. No mirror reflecting. There is no mirror reflecting. All along manifestation alone is. The one hand claps. Everything is. Effectively, phase 4 is merely the experience of non-division between subject-object. The initial insight glimpsed from the Anatta stanza is without self, but in the later phase of my progress it appeared more like subject-object as an inseparable union, rather than absolutely no subject. This is precisely the second case of the 3 levels of understanding non-dual. I was still awed by the pristineness and vividness of phenomena in phase 4. Phase 5 is quite thorough in being no one, and I would call this anatta in all 3 aspects: no subject-object division, no doership, and absence of agent. The trigger point here is the direct and thorough seeing that the mirror is nothing more than an arising thought. With this, the solidity and all the grandeur of Brahman goes down the drain. Yet it feels perfectly right and liberating without the agent and being simply as an arising thought or as a vivid moment of a bell resounding. All the vividness and presence remains, with an additional sense of freedom. Here a mirror reflection union is clearly understood as flawed. There is only vivid reflection. There cannot be a union if there isn't a subject to begin with. It is only in subtle recalling, that is in a thought recalling a previous moment of thought, that the watcher seems to exist. From here, I moved towards the 3rd degree of non-dual. In the case of Helen Hamilton, she didn't realize that she was enlightened until some of her friends mentioned she seemed different. She then did some self-examination and found it was true. I didn't get a lot of details on that. But there's the case of Ramesh Balskar. He was the translator for Nisargadatta Maharaj. Nisargadatta was a cigarette seller with a 3rd grade education. Ramesh was the president of the Bank of India. Nisargadatta told Ramesh there was no gap in his translating, and that was a tell that he was enlightened. He transitioned to enlightenment through translating for Nisargadatta. So service to a sage is a path. So after initial realization, there is a something that happens where psychic structures are overcome and disappear. Since whatever pattern is gone is notable only in its absence, it is sometimes unrecognized for a while. Shadow work and dissolving psychological structures notable by their absence. A number of people have done shadow work before and after an initial realization. Like you need to clean up the unconscious and make it habitable for a new resident. This is similar to the yogi's burning of the samskaras in the heart. The stanza 1 complements and refines stanza 2 to make the experience of no self thorough and effortless into just only chirping birds, drum beats, footsteps, sky, mountain, walking, chewing and tasting. No witness whatsoever hiding anywhere. Everything is a process, event, manifestation, and phenomenon, nothing ontological or having an essence. This phase is a very thorough non-dual experience. There is effortlessness in the non-dual, and one realizes that in seeing there is always just scenery, and in hearing, always just sounds. We find true delights in naturalness and ordinariness as commonly expressed in Zen as chop wood, carry water, spring comes, grass grows. With regards to ordinariness, see on Maha in ordinariness, this must also be correctly understood. A recent conversation with Simpo summarizes what I am trying to convey with regards to ordinariness. Simpo, Longchen, is a very insightful and sincere practitioner. There are some very good quality articles written by him regarding non-duality in his website Dream Datum. Yes, Simpo. Non-dual is ordinary as there is no beyond stage to arrive at. It appears to be extraordinary and grandeur only as an afterthought due to comparison. That said, the Maha experience appearing as universe-chewing, and the spontaneity of pristine happening must still remain Maha, free, boundless, and clear. For that is what it is and cannot be otherwise. The extraordinariness and grandeur that result from comparison must also be correctly discerned from the what is of non-dual. Whenever contraction steps in, it is already a manifestation of experiencer-experience split. Conventionally speaking, that being the cause, that is the effect. Whatever the condition is, be it the result of unfavorable situations or subtle recalling to arrive at a certain good sensation or attempting to fix an imaginary split, we have to treat it that the non-dual insight has not pervaded into our entire being like the way karmic tendency to divide does. We have not fearlessly, openly, and unreservedly welcomed whatever is. Smiley face. Just my view, a casual sharing. Practitioners at this level often get overexcited believing that this phase is final. In fact, it does appear to be a sort of pseudo-finality. But this is a misunderstanding. Nothing much can be said. The practitioner will also be naturally led into spontaneous perfection without going further in emptying the aggregates. Smiley face. Comments. The drop is thorough. The center is gone. The center is nothing more than a subtle karmic tendency to divide. A more poetic expression would be sound hears, scenery sees. The dust is the mirror. Transient phenomena themselves have always been the mirror. Only a strong dualistic view prevents the seeing. Very often cycles after cycles of refining our insights are needed to make the non-dual less concentrative and more effortless. This relates to experiencing the non-solidity and spontaneity of experience. At this phase, we must be clear that emptying the subject will only result in non-duality, and there is a need to further empty the aggregates, the 18 dhatus. This means one must further penetrate the emptiness nature of the 5 aggregates and the 18 dhatus. With dependent origination and emptiness. The need to reify a universal Brahman is understood as the karmic tendency to solidify experiences. This leads to the understanding of the empty nature of non-dual presence. Stage 6. The nature of presence is empty. Phase 4 and 5 are the grayscale of seeing through the subject that it does not exist in actuality. Anatta, there are only the aggregates. As in seeing just the scene, however, even the aggregates are empty. Heart Sutra. It may sound obvious, but more often than not, even a practitioner who has matured the anatta experience, as in phase 5, will miss the essence of it. As I have said earlier, phase 5 does appear to be final, and it is pointless to emphasize anything with the student who reports this. Whether one proceeds further to explore this empty nature of presence and move into the Maha world of suchness will depend on our conditions. Greg Good article on emptiness. At this juncture, it is necessary to have clarity on what emptiness is not to prevent misunderstandings. Emptiness is not a substance. Emptiness is not a substratum or background. Emptiness is not light. Emptiness is not consciousness or awareness. Emptiness is not the absolute. Emptiness does not exist on its own. Objects do not consist of emptiness. Objects do not arise from emptiness. Emptiness of the I does not negate the I. Emptiness is not the feeling that results when no objects are appearing to the mind. Meditating on emptiness does not consist of quieting the mind. Source: Non-dual emptiness teaching. And I would like to add, emptiness is not a path of practice. Emptiness is not a form of fruition. Emptiness is hard to understand and accept. If you have ever had an insight or deep intuitive understanding, you can see emptiness as a character of the Buddha mind. In the moment of understanding the elements of the problem, a math problem or a life problem, the elements of the problem are liquefied, desubstantialized, mentalized. Then with a glance the problem is seen through. You have a solution. Avalokiteshvara called the one who always looks upon all beings, or the Lord who sees in every direction with the eye of compassion, but can be interpreted as the eye of insight. Later you can recall the circumstances, but that doesn't capture the power and character of the event. The liquefaction and seeing through and the electric flash of insight are due to the mysterious nature of emptiness of the true mind, as PB mentions. Emptiness is the nature of all experiences. There is nothing to attain or practice. What we have to realize is this empty nature, this ungraspability, unlocatability, and interconnectedness, nature of all vivid arising. Emptiness will reveal that not only is there no who, in pristine awareness, there is no where and when. Be it I, here, or now, all are simply impressions that dependently originate in accordance with the principle of conditionality. When there is this, that is. With the arising of this, that arises. When this is not, neither is that. With the cessation of this, that ceases. The teaching of dependent arising has two aspects. An abstract principle, or what we might call a structural principle. The application of that principle to the problem of suffering. First, we'll briefly explore dependent arising as the most fundamental law underlying every process and all phenomena. This law is beginningless and endless. This structural principle that underlies all phenomena is the law of conditionality. That is, whatever arises in dependence on conditions. Everything that exists in dependence on conditions. And without the support of the appropriate conditions, the given phenomena will not be able to remain in existence. This is illustrated by a formula which explains the conditional arising and cessation of phenomena. When there is this, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When there is not this, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. The profundity of this four-liner principle of conditionality is not in words. For a more theoretical exposition, see Non-Dual Emptiness Teachings by Dr. Greg Good. For a more experiential narration, see the subsection on emptiness and on Maha of the post on Anatta, no self, emptiness, Maha and ordinariness, and spontaneous perfection. So comments. Here practice is clearly understood as neither going after the mirror nor escaping from the Maya reflection. It is to thoroughly see the nature of reflection. To see that there is really no mirror other than the ongoing reflection due to our emptiness nature. Neither is there a mirror to cling to as the background reality, nor a Maya to escape from. Beyond these two extremes lies the middle path, the prajna wisdom of seeing that the Maya is our Buddha nature. Problem. How is it that insight can also solve problems in science and cosmology? The world mind also holds all the laws, patterns, dynamics of manifestation, the laws of science. So insight can be into relativity, as in the case of Einstein. The last three subsections, on emptiness, on maha and ordinariness, spontaneous perfection of the post, on anatta, no self, emptiness, maha and ordinariness, and spontaneous perfection, elaborates this phase of emptiness insight and the gradual progress of maturing the experience into the effortless mode of practice. It is important to know that in addition to the experience of the unfindability and ungraspability of emptiness, the interconnectedness of everything creating the Maha experience is equally precious. Dependent origination and emptiness Buddhist teaching. Dependent origination, SKT, Praditya Samutpada, Pali, Paticca Samuppada, is also known as conditioned co-arising and several other terms. Buddhism teaches that everything that exists is conditioned, dependent on something else. This applies to thoughts as well as objects, to the individual as well as the entire universe. Nothing exists independently. Everything is conditioned. Stage 7. Presence is spontaneously perfected. After cycles and cycles of refining our practice and insights, we will come to this realization. Anatta is a seal, not a stage. Awareness has always been non-dual. Appearances have always been non-arising. All phenomena are interconnected and by nature Maha. All are always and already so. Only dualistic and inherent views are obscuring these experiential facts, and therefore what is really needed is simply to experience whatever arises openly and unreservedly. See section on spontaneous perfection. However, this does not denote the end of practice. Practice simply moves to become dynamic and conditions manifestation-based. The ground and the path of practice become indistinguishable. And as Thusness wrote before, hijacks, despite all differences we may have about lower yanas, no practice is needed, absolute. I really appreciate your zealous attempt to bring this message into view, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on this aspect of transmission. If one truly wants this essence to be transmitted, how can it be otherwise? For what that is to be passed is truly of different dimension. How can it be adulterated with words and forms? The ancient teachers are extremely serious, observing and waiting for the right condition to pass the essence unreservedly and wholeheartedly. So much so that when the essence is transmitted, it must boil the blood and penetrate deep into the bone marrow. The entire body-mind must become one opening eye. Once open, everything turns to spirit, mind, intellect drops, and what's left is aliveness and intelligence everywhere. Jax, I sincerely hope you well. Just don't leave trace in the absolute. Gone. Many may wonder, why the need for so many phases of insights? Is there a way to reach liberation instantly? Some people find all these stages and information to be overly complex. Isn't truth something that is direct and simple? For the fortunate few, or perhaps someone of higher capacity, like Baya of the bark cloth, they were able to attain liberation immediately upon hearing a single verse of Dhamma/Dharma from the Buddha. For the majority of us, there's a process of uncovering truth and penetrating our thick layers of delusions. It is very common to get stuck at a phase of realization and think that one has reached a finality, even in earlier phases like Thusness Stage 1, but are still unable to dissolve subtle identities and reification that cause clinging, thus preventing liberation. If one is able to penetrate by insight and dissolve all self/self/identities/reifications at once, one may be liberated on the spot. But if, most likely the case, one does not have this capacity to penetrate all delusions at once, further pointings and phases of insights are necessary. As thusness said, although Joan Tollefson spoke of the natural non-dual state as something so simple, so immediate, so obvious, so ever-present that we often overlook, we have to understand that to even come to this realization of the simplicity of what is, a practitioner will need to undergo a painstaking process of deconstructing the mental constructs. Shadow work. We must be deeply aware of the blinding spell in order to understand consciousness. I believe Joan must have gone through a period of deep confusions, not to underestimate it. Smiley face. Excerpt from 3 Paradigms with Non-Dual Luminosity. As John Tan said, though Buddha nature is plainness and most direct, these are still the steps. If one does not know the process and said, yes, this is it, then it is extremely misleading. For 99% of realized/enlightened persons, what one is talking about is I amness and has not gone beyond permanence, still thinking of permanence, formless. All and almost all will think of it along the line of I amness. All are like the grandchildren of amness, and that is the root cause of duality. John Tan, 2007. Attachments.